So inshallah, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Shaykha Muslema Purmul. She graduated from the University of California, San Diego with a double major in religious studies and Middle Eastern studies. After graduating, she left to study in Egypt, where she spent the better part of the next 7 years. She completed the bachelor's program in Sharia from Al-Azhar University in Cairo, and also completed almost 2 years of graduate work at the American University in Cairo in Islamic studies. She also attended the International Union of Muslim Scholars Future Scholars Program while in Cairo. She currently serves as a religious director at the Majlis, a community organization she and her husband co-founded together to nurture safe community spaces where people can learn and live Islam based on the traditional sources of understanding the faith while acknowledging the particular challenges of American context. She's also a mother of 2 and resides with her family in Southern California. Shaykha Muslema Purmul.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. It's truly a blessing to be with you all tonight. I feel actually very honored that at 10:30 in the morning today on Friday, all of you have come, and I pray inshallah that we all benefit from this session. This topic, and I only have 18 minutes to deal with it, is a really, really important topic for our time. Identity is not the same as obviously identity politics, right? The Muslim spiritual identity, the Muslim religious identity is one thing, and defending our identity in a society like America is related to that, but it's not the same thing. And sometimes we as an American Muslim community can confuse the two. What am I doing versus who am I, right? How do I respond to the world versus what do I actually believe? And so one of the places that we can root ourselves very comfortably, this is where we root our spiritual religious identity as Muslims, is something actually that I mentioned last night, on the main stage, which is the famous Hadith Jibreel, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is sitting and a man comes to him and he has no sign of travel, he's wearing a white thobe, and he sits in front of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with his knees against the Prophet's knees, and he asks the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what is Islam? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells this man what the 5 pillars of Islam is. And the man says, you have spoken correctly. And Umar, who's sitting there saying, we're shocked that he could ask that of the Prophet, and then he would tell him, yes, you're right. Then again, he says, what is Iman? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ answers with the 6 pillars of Iman, and then again, he says, yes, you're right. You have spoken correctly. And what is Ihsan? To worship Allah as though you see Him, even though you don't see Him, knowing that He sees you. And again, yes, you're right. And then he says, when is the day of judgment? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ answers, and he says, the one asking doesn't know any more than the one who is being asked. And he says, okay, then what are some of its signs? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentions some of the minor signs of the day of judgment. And then, the man leaves the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and the Prophet turns to Umar radiallahu anhu, and he says, Umar, do you know who this was? And he says, Allah and His Messenger know best. And he says, this was the angel Jibreel who came to teach you your religion. To teach you your religion. So this is not just to Umar, this is to the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We are rooted as an identity in Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, and that we will live all of these 3 aspects of our deen in every single context there is. The minor signs of the Day of Judgment, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in every century, the community of believers witnessed minor signs of the Day of Judgment. So what we understand is that as these signs are coming to unfold in front of people, they are seeing the evidences of what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the prophecies that were foretold. And yes, in these times that you see these difficult things, you're supposed to live Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And this Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, each one of them is an ocean. It's not a word. How if we want to think about prayer, salah, right? Just to study the book of salah, if you take a proper class in fiqh, you're not going to finish it, before a month is over. At least a month, if not more. The ahkam. The first body, Islam, is literally submission. It's physical submission. It's the rules. It's the do's. It's the don'ts. It's the law. All right. That law is part of our identity. that law, even if we can't meet up to all of its aspects. But I believe in this law. This law has come to me from my Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, revealed to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and has been put together, understood, and articulated by the inheritors of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who are the ulama and the scholars, right? So I understand that this whole body of knowledge, you can call it the Sharia, I can study it for my whole life. And it includes usul al-fiqh, it includes تغير الفتوى بزمان ومكان, it includes maqasid al-sharia, it includes all of the things that deal with the law. But it is not the entirety of my religion. And I think a lot of us, maybe some of us grew up thinking this is Islam. And it is Islam, but it's not iman or ihsan. There's still 2/3 that I have yet to root myself in. And I think personally that the American Muslim community, we tend to be weaker when it comes to iman, when it comes to understanding iman. And the reason is because we don't study it. When you go to Sunday school, the first thing you do is the ahkam, ahkam, ahkam. But we don't study iman. And iman is also another body, it's an ocean of knowledge. And we can root ourselves in iman, and we will find strength, and we will find fortitude. And all of these narrations that we have from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and these verses in the Quran that we read that are indicators to us about how do we formulate our iman, with aqeedah, with the study of sound aqeedah, we put these concepts in the right place. Otherwise, when they're in the wrong place, we hurt ourselves and we hurt other people. Okay? It really dawned on me a long time ago when I heard a scholar who teaches aqeedah say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will not find a verse in the Quran, you will not find a narration in the ahadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where we are told by the Prophet or by Allah to feel guilty for our blessings. You have a nice house. There's no worship in feeling guilty about that. There's no you didn't get any good deeds because you felt guilty about having nice things. But what we were told is that we will be held accountable for what we have. So use what we have. We're given blessings. Alhamdulillah, we're given certain things. This is the blessing of Allah. So we have to show gratitude to Allah, we have to be thankful, and then we simply have to use these blessings in a way that Allah is pleased with. If we're using blessings in haram, okay, then you can feel guilty. Then we need to make tawbah. But if you're not using your blessings in haram, the mere reality of blessings is not a reason for you to feel like you're a bad person. Okay? So we can extend this. There's also survivor's guilt, which is a natural feeling, by the way. But again, we have a spiritual tradition that roots us in what is this, where do we put things? How do we believe in things? And so I actually have a presentation here, and I'm not going to go through all of it. But one of the first works that was ever written in Aqeedah was by Imam Abu Hanifa. And it was called Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar, right? The bigger fiqh, or the greater fiqh. This is someone who is known in our history as the first imam of the four madhahib. He did fiqh and he did usul al-fiqh. This is what he was busy with, fatwa, rulings. But then he wrote a smaller text that scholars have since then done commentaries on, al-fiqh al-akbar. And he says this is greater because this is actually what roots our belief, right? And if you don't have sound belief, it's very hard to do the things we're supposed to do. Right? If your belief, if your conviction, if your knowledge is not put in the right place of what do I actually believe about difficulties and tests, about free will and predestination, about all these things that are actually part of our aqeedah that are, again, they're topics, but it's an ocean of knowledge. You can have your PhD in aqeedah. And I'm not saying we need to do our PhD, but I'm saying we need to know our fard ayn. We need to know what we ourselves will be held accountable for and what we can benefit from, especially given the times that we're seeing. So the first thing that he mentions is in his Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar is the fundamentals of the 6 pillars of Iman. And he says that the entire treatise, which is, again, it has commentaries that are long, is on the fundamentals of divine oneness and the tenets upon which it is correct to base one's belief. It is obligatory for a person to state, I believe in Allah, His angels, His scriptures, His messengers, resurrection after death, that destiny, good and evil, is from Allah Most High, the reckoning, the scale, paradise and hellfire, that they are all true. So they're not, people in the past, they were they couldn't imagine the unseen being real. So rather than simply to accept the unseen, they said, oh no, these are just sort of like metaphorical realities. They don't really exist. No, they actually exist. We say these things are real. And does paradise exist right now? Yes, it exists right now. Is hellfire in existence right now? Yes, it's in existence right now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has essential attributes. These are attributes of His self, okay? Dhatihi. And then He has attributes that are in relationship to His actions. So He mentions that as for His essential attributes, they are life, power, knowledge, speech, hearing, seeing, and willing. And as for His, well, I'll pause here, something to say about each one of these. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always these. He's never not any one of these. So He is always speaking, and He is always hearing, and He is always alive, and has always been alive, and will always be alive. His knowledge was, is, and always will be fully complete, without any deficiency. So these are things that they have an effect. If you actually learn this and put it in the right place, when tribulation hits, like what's happening in Palestine, this was known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before He ever created the world. What's happening to the people in Palestine right now, even though it's horrific for us to experience it, it's very difficult, there's some comfort in knowing that the one whose knowledge is absolutely perfect and fully complete knew this before the creation of the world, before I was born or you were born, before the state of Israel existed, and before even Umar came when he was a Khalifa, and when the Muslims first became the rulers of it under the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. All of this was known in pre-existence. Power and will. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who does what He wills. There's a narration that I think is a really important narration as it relates to this. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, but there is goodness in both. Be eager or strive for that which benefits you, seek help from Allah, and وَلَا تَعْجَزْ. That was translated as don't be frustrated. It means don't become incapacitated. Don't just get flustered and stop. Don't quiet quit. If something befalls you, then do not say, if only I had done something else. Rather say, Allah has decreed what He wills. Verily the phrase, if only, opens the way for the work of shaitan. قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. That once something is in the past, it's part of the divine decree. Okay, I have to focus on the present and the future. That's what I'm held accountable for. But what has already occurred in the past, I now recognize that as having been part of the divine decree. Does that mean that I'm supposed to stop striving for what's beneficial? That's the exact opposite of what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ just said in the hadith. And this is something that we have in our aqidah. And it's almost like I haven't seen a place where the divine decree is mentioned and striving and doing something with our efforts is not also mentioned. You see Yawm al-Qiyamah coming in front of you, and you have a seed to plant it. There's always this, you must strive, you must do, you must act, you must attain what's beneficial, and at the same time, you must believe that there's divine decree and it's coming. And so, what does this do for us when we can both act in the present and inshallah try to affect change in the future, but at the same time be in a state of acceptance for what has already occurred in the past, as قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. Allah ordained this and He does what He wills. I don't just say, as a believer of His divine knowledge, I don't just say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has perfect knowledge and that everything, I don't say that everything's good. We like to say inshallah khair. Khair is not just good, it's what's best. And so reconciling the pain and the suffering that we see in the world with the idea that once something has been decreed, I don't just believe that it's good, I believe it's actually the best. that could have happened. Nothing better than that could have happened. And that my vision is somewhat limited, but through Aqidah, actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up some of that vision. He gives us some understanding of how to appreciate these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing. His knowledge, again, pre-existing knowledge, all-wise. He doesn't just know what is. He doesn't know just everything that's currently in existence. All the atoms and cells that are in our bodies, every passing thought that passes through anyone's mind, every grain of sand in any part of the world, the blowing of leaves. He doesn't just know that. He knows the infinite possibilities of everything that does not exist. So when he chooses something to be, when he says kun fayakun, when something comes into existence, it's a very specific choice. There's no coincidence about it. There's no haphazardness. Everything is with divine wisdom. Everything is with divine wisdom. And so Imam Ghazali has a famous statement, and it helps us actually deal with the past. He says, nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was. Nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was. That's a statement of Iman. That is practical Iman. That's someone who understands their Aqidah really well. Because this means I don't need to cry over the past. I mean, I will cry from pain, and obviously we all have pain, or like emotions as human beings, but I am not going to cry about something in the sense that exhaust my hours and my days on spilled milk, when I could be doing something right now that's beneficial to help change the situation and choose resilience. And one of the things I'm so amazed at in the Palestinian people is, I can imagine, honestly, if I was in their shoes, if something like that, God forbid, happened to me, I think I probably would just wait for death. Like, I think I'd be depressed. I think I'd be very, very depressed. But the fact that when we're seeing videos of them under the worst persecution you can imagine, that kind of a persecution, and the hospitals are still working with whatever supplies they have, the doctors are still doing what they're doing, people are feeding each other, everybody is still taking asbab, 80 days in, they're still striving, and you're looking at that faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has rooted in their hearts, and it's inspiring the whole world to actually look at the Quran, to look at the book that our Iman is based on. What is giving them their strength? They haven't rolled over and given up. We have no right to roll over and give up. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, wondrous is the affair of the believer, for there is good in him in every matter, and this is not the case with anyone except the believer. So belief is part of how we enjoy these blessings. If he is blessed, if he's given, then he is happy and he thanks Allah, and thus there is good for him, right? He has gratitude, there's reward in gratitude, and he has enjoyment. And if he is harmed and he shows patience, right, then he's rewarded, and thus there is good for him. In both cases, the believer is rewarded in good times and in bad times, or difficult times. But is any time truly a bad time? Not for the believer. I have less than a minute left. There's a lot more to go. I have a 20-part PowerPoint. I think one thing that I wanted to mention in terms of free will and predestination is that we can actually look to the example of someone in Palestine, our mother Maryam alayhi salam. She experienced a mu'jiza, a miracle, which was when she was young, and this story is mentioned in the Quran, and the Mufassirin give the details. And the Prophet Zakaria would come to her because he was taking care of her in the masjid, and he would find with her that the fruits of the summer would be with her at wintertime, and the fruits of the wintertime would be at summertime. So they would just be in her room. She would wake up and this would be there. And the Prophet Zakaria alayhi salam, he asks her, where did you get this? And she responds that Allah is the one who provides rizq from wherever he wills. Right? So she's a young girl in the masjid, and this is what, she just wakes up and there's food. Now later on, that's a miracle, right? Later on, she has Isa alayhi salam by herself, right? And this is a miracle also. But after delivery, and I don't know how many of you are mothers in this room, right? It's revealed to her, in order for her to attain strength, to actually shake the trunk of a palm tree. And it's in one of the tafsirs it mentions this was a palm tree that was not just a palm tree. I don't know if you've ever seen a palm tree and tried to shake its trunk while you're laying on the ground, but that this was one that was actually dried up. It had no fruits. So when she's a child, Allah gives her a miracle, which is she has food for free when she wakes up. No effort, nothing, it's just there. And it's not even the fruit of her time, it's the fruit of a different season. But now, at a time when she's in the most need, right? She just delivered a baby, she's by herself, there's no one else with her. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells her to shake the trunk of a palm tree. That takes iman. That takes a rooted iman in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His qudra. In the belief that nothing, the norms that I see in the world, they're all imkaniyat. They're all possibilities. And it's very possible for Allah to change any of these norms in any second. In every breath, the world is being recreated, right? So it's not hard for the biggest of miracles. It's not hard for Allah. Nothing is hard for Allah. So she shakes the trunk of a palm tree and the dates fall. And so for a lot of us looking at what's happening, we're like, these efforts, calling our congressmen, sending emails, whatever efforts we're doing, it's very easy to get to a point where you're like, what's the point? It's not making an impact. You know, and I want to say we take inspiration from this idea that we still have free will. Things are decreed, but we still have free will, and we are asked about our choices. What are you doing with what Allah has given you? If you have to shake the trunk of a palm tree, that's the metaphor. Whatever we're doing, as long as this intention is, Ya Allah, I'm doing whatever is in my capacity to respond to this test, inshallah it's accepted, it's rewarded, and you don't know where the blessing will come from. It could come from the place that you don't think there's any blessing there or any effect there, but that person did it as worship, because they're like, this is all that I can do, so I'm going to do it, and you don't know if that's going to be the door of the opening. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to root ourselves in our aqidah. This fiqh al-akbar, I want to say, take any of the texts of our tradition in aqidah and just go through it, go through the commentaries, and think about any tribulation that you're going through and see how it puts things in the right place, puts your emotions in the right place, puts your efforts in the right place, gives you not just conviction, but gives you the strength to keep going. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us that and allow us to be a people who benefit from this blessed identity of being Muslims who follow this amazing deen. Whatever I said that's beneficial is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever I said that's wrong and mistaken is from myself and shaitan. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Shaykha Muslema. I wish we had more time to really take in all this knowledge and wisdom. It's absolutely fascinating. Just to recap really quick, I learned a few things. It was a question of who am I and what do I believe in? But a few things really stuck out to me. It's Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, and applying that context to our life, but really the body of the law and knowledge. And that really just applies to me as a person, as a professional, and inshallah, with Sheikh Mustafa and Shaykha Muslema, we were able to gather so much wisdom. Thank you so much, Sheikh Mustafa and Shaykha Muslema. Thank you for your wisdom and your knowledge. I wish we had more time, but we did go over, and I wanted to at least cover the two topics that were important. So thank you all for your time, and inshallah you enjoy the rest of the convention.